Welcome to the Open Door. Jim Hanink here with fellow panelists Mario Ramos-Reyes and Valerie Niemeyer. Today, we discuss the politics of the presidency and vice presidency. November and the national election, well, they're not so far off. The Biden versus Trump rematch is officially scheduled. But here at the Open Door, we want to think outside the duopoly's binary box. That means checking in on the candidates of the American Solidarity Party. Our returning and welcome guest is Mr. Peter Sonski. A New England native, Peter and his wife have 9 adult children. He has a Master of Science in Management, that's an MSM, degree from the Catholic University of America. His professional experience is in journalism, public relations, and business administration. Peter is concluding his second term as an elected member of the Connecticut's Regional School District 17 Board of Education. He'll have lots to tell us about his presidential campaign. Let's begin, as we always do, in prayer. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful and kindle in them the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. O God, who have taught the hearts of the faithful by the light of the Holy Spirit, grant that in the same Spirit we may be always truly wise and ever rejoice in his consolation. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. Peter, what does it mean to you to be a pro-life candidate, pro-life all through life as a candidate for the President of the United States?
Well, thank you, Jim. Pro-life is, as you described, respecting life in all its stages, from the womb to the tomb, right? We're not merely interested in a focus on the issue of abortion. We're also focused on the quality of life throughout its majority, and especially concerned with the quality of life at its ending. So there are many issues that threaten life in the womb. There are many issues that create hardships for people throughout their own lives. And needless to say, in particular, the issue of euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide, aid in dying, however we'd like to term it, has become very prevalent. But human life, human dignity is very real, and it's something that we as a society have, I feel, a diminished respect for. And it's easily dismissed in some of the political policy issues that are part of the current major parties' platforms. But in the American Solidarity Party, we respect that consistent life ethic. As I said, from the beginning of life, from fertilization all the way to natural end.
I can't help but think of California. We have a new bill, newly introduced, that would eliminate all prior safeguards for physician-assisted suicide, including the assistance of a physician. It's really straight-on euthanasia, and there would be how long of a waiting period? None. And it's just extraordinary. It's really Canada comes to California. So we're doing everything we can to impede that bill. Well, Mario,
I have a question. Um, in the old scholastic tradition, which comes from Aristotle, we say that the first act is the intention, and the last is the execution of that intention. My question is, given the panorama, the perspective that you see in the US, which is completely against pro life, not only among politicians, but also, I think statistically, the population is not pro life mainly. And so the prospect that a candidacy from the American Solidarity Party on that platform, pro life, to seems to me that is from the beginning not it's not going to be successful. Now, if that is the case, what was your intention for running? Just to win the election, which seems to be unlikely, the result, or what else?
Well, Mario, thank you for a thoughtful question. I think I would take issue with the point that the majority of Americans and particularly American voters are against pro-life issues. I tend to think that there are more in favor than we acknowledge, but there is certainly prevailing sentiment that is expressed to us in public media and elsewhere that would make us think differently. But I do believe that there are a vast number of individuals that still do have a respect for human life and seek protections for human life. But to your larger question about my ambitions, it's multiple. Naturally, I certainly want to advance these policy positions and appeal to public virtue, as I've been alluding. There are people that hold that position, and I want to increase the number that do, and I want to put forward an entirely new perspective, a new platform that is distinct from what Americans have had offered to them in the historic past. We've been largely a two-party system, Democrats and Republicans, that for the longest time has offered American voters very little alternative, yet the positions they hold, I would offer, are not consistent with the positions that many voters hold. And they have to pick and choose those positions that they value the most in making decisions on which candidates to support. I like to think that there are a number of inconsistencies in the major parties' platforms, whereas I don't see those inconsistencies at all in the ASP platform. I think it's very holistic. In fact, when I was first introduced to it, I've used the term "it fit me like a glove." It was what I considered to be a series of principles and policy positions that were complementary of each other and that I think have broad appeal. It's just that they don't have broad recognition as yet. So my ambition, Mario, naturally is to bring to American voters minimally the introduction of a different platform, a different position than they have received in years past, to hopefully prevail on them to give it consideration and support. I'm not a pie in the sky person, understanding that I have an easy path. I consider it to be completely uphill, but this is how change begins. And so hopefully I'll be an agent of change.
Well, but let me inform you that my state a year ago tried to pass an amendment to the Constitution which prohibit abortion. And this is supposed to be or used to be a pro-life state. Even though people campaign from the bishop down in favor of that prohibition, the result was completely the opposite. 60% of the people were against that. And so what seems to be a pro-life state was not, even though, and that was after the ruling of the Supreme Court on abortion, that put
The Dobbs decision.
in history Roe versus Wade. So it seems that there was a shift toward the, let's say, pro-abortion trend, not only in Kansas, in many other states. So unfortunately, this is what the statistics are showing. That is my point. We can believe whatever we want, but the fact of the matter is that for some reason, after that ruling, people were moving toward the left in that issue.
You're right. And I think that the way that the proponents of abortion have framed it as an imposition of personal liberty, that, you know, it's a woman's body and it's her right to do what she will, but they deny the fact that that woman's body was inside another woman's body at some time, and had it been aborted, it wouldn't have any choice whatsoever. So here again, it's the way that the argument has been framed. It's been framed as a personal liberty issue. And Mario, we as a society can do much better to support women who are in crisis pregnancies. There's no question about that. There is a tremendous burden in providing for the care for an individual, the prenatal care, the delivery, the postpartum care, and then the costs naturally of rearing a child. We as a society have not put a premium on supporting women in that realm, and we need to do a better job of it. We're doing a poor job, and we're doing a poor job of communicating it. The other side has been much more effective in sharing that this is an issue that, as I said, they portray as a violation of human liberty. It's regrettable, but it's a fact. And we need to do better. And as I say, we need to appeal to public virtue and help them to better understand the truth of the matter.
Thank you.
I like your statement.
Yes.
I like your statement that we need to appeal to public virtue. And I think that I think more and more I feel like that's critical is holding up the beautiful, like a beautiful vision of humanity and of reproductive activity and of men and women and the vocation of love and marriage. And so that positive vision and helping Americans have a more positive vision versus kind of a fear-mongering approach, which I think is sometimes what's behind a lot of people's maybe not so pro-life as we would wish. They're afraid of what might happen, what might be hard for women, for families, for the poor. And they just don't trust that holding to a higher aspiration and vision of humanity and all these things is really going to pan out. But I think, like you say, encouraging that public virtue and that vision is a great way to approach it and a necessary way to approach it. You've been also, I think, doing this on a local level, trying to advocate for high ideals and virtue in the educational system, as I understand. And so I'm curious how your experience in local politics informed your approach to this campaign.
You know, there's an old saying, Valerie, that all politics is local, right? You've heard that, I think. Politics involves people. And where you are closest to the people you serve, you are most effective. So at the local level, there is really an impact that can be observed and felt, and it's palpable. The ASP in general is very supportive of a principle called subsidiarity, giving authority to the lowest level of government, the level that is closest to the people. It doesn't apply exclusively to government. It applies the principle of subsidiarity, that is, throughout all facets of society. But as I alluded to, as a local school board member, you're seeing the product of your decisions in the students and how they develop and learn and advance. You're talking to parents one-on-one. You are visiting with administrators and faculty members and staff, whether they be coaches or janitors or whoever at the school, and really understanding how the programs that you are developing are helping the students to advance as human beings, to learn and to form themselves into productive citizens. So I see that as a tremendous advantage. Now, as you move higher in realms of government to either a county or a state or a federal level, you become another layer removed from the people it is you serve. I don't suggest that you become less effective, but I do suggest that you perhaps become more detached. So for me, the heavy bureaucracy that we have as a federal government is less effective than the levels of government that are closest to the people, those that serve on local and county agencies, whether they're elected or appointed, to really provide for the needs of the people in their locale. And if I can go back to your opening statement, I appreciate your support of that, the appeal to public virtue. I think that it's important to note that in this issue of life, we have a desire to solve things governmentally. We have this plan that we're going to pass a law and everything's going to be right. But I think, to your point, we need to get to a place where society can say it's unthinkable to kill a child in the womb. I mean, think about the situation that the response that we as individuals have whenever we hear of a school shooting. You know, the horror that immediately follows. Think about the efforts we go to, for example, when a child is abducted and we get an Amber Alert, or even a hiker is lost on a mountain somewhere. Think of just recently, we had the terrible tragedy, the bridge collapse in Baltimore, and those 6 immigrant workers that were patching potholes on the bridge deck that were lost, and the efforts that we went to try to recover them, to save them. Those are all examples of how we as a society value human life. But for one reason or another, we haven't been able to identify that human life when it's hidden in the womb of a woman. And we need to get to that place. We need to value that life as much as we value the life of others in those descriptions. Sorry to take you on a tangent.
Yeah, that's well articulated and really helps to kind of make more concrete that topic. I want to take you back to the subsidiarity principle, and I totally appreciate and agree with your point about the closer decision makers are to the people the decisions affect, the better. And at the same time, I wonder how you would articulate the need to sometimes go up a level. At what point is there a need to become to go to a higher level? Because some people are.
Sure.
I've heard one of the things that I hear a lot, is kind of this idea that big government is evil, and anything that sort of we want to avoid all kind of big government and federal type things that could be done on a lower level. And so I'm just curious how you would articulate the need at times to become more distant from the people, if you will, from the local level.
Sure. Well, international relations, foreign diplomacy, obviously that's not something you're going to do from the city council level. interstate commerce, national defense. I mean, there are real issues that we have that need a federal level of government to manage. But I don't suggest, as an example, education needs a federal level of management. I know that we have a Secretary of Education. I know we have a Department of Education. But I suggest that education can be effectively deployed at a much lower level, a level much closer to the students themselves, and it doesn't need that layer of oversight. The same is true with housing. The same is true with a variety of other public services that we can determine effective ways of implementing at a level much closer to the people, probably much more efficiently as well.
Mm-hmm.
Does that does it answer your question more importantly?
Yeah, it does. And I think, another area specifically that I like regulatory things, I think sometimes can be an issue where people don't want, they find that the regulation from the federal level is unwieldy, but at the same time, we've seen in the past that companies, in business or in on the state level, very often the oversight doesn't happen, or the regulations, like there's a what's the word, exploitation that happens that sort of needs the government to have its back, like the people do. So regulation is an area that I think I also hear sort of negativity about sometimes in certain circles, that it's like, yeah, but if we didn't have that regulation, then we've seen kind of what happens. So that was one area too. I don't know if you would want to comment on.
Mm-hmm. I would only offer that, again, the farther removed from the people that those regulations are established, the more difficult it is for people to have impact in making change or improvement. A local ordinance, for example, about not parking on a certain side of the street is an easier issue for someone to tackle by going to City Hall than a federal regulation on a form of commerce or other issue. Again, I think the most impactful of those laws and regulations are usually those that are at a level closer to us, but I don't discount the fact that there are many that come from federal and state levels that have impacts on our lives, and we're hard pressed to be effective at bringing improvement to them when we have so much distance between ourselves and the individuals who are responsible for making changes to those, whether they be legislators or bureaucrats in state and federal offices. So the subsidiarity principle of having everything as close and as accessible to the people, and having those individual agencies, those individual lawmakers be able to really observe and understand what the circumstances are at a local level and how it's impacting those that are being advantaged or disadvantaged by them, the better.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
I have some might think it a sprawling observation to make, but I see it as two-pronged, and it mostly goes back in our conversation rather than ahead in our conversation. Although we got some really neat stuff to pursue in our conversation. Prong number one, and this really, I think, connects with something that Mario said and you've commented on, the reception, the public reception of pro-life versus pro-abortion arguments. Believe it or not, once upon a time, it was 50 years ago. And I wrote a dissertation at a decidedly secular school, Michigan State, where after a couple semesters, I asked one of the faculty members, I was a graduate student, are there any believers in the faculty in this department of philosophy? And he said to me, you know, I think so-and-so might be one. And that was it. Well, at any rate, my dissertation topic was persons' rights and the problem of abortion. And there's a lot to be said on all three fronts. And I chose for my director someone who I thought was the most forceful, most conscientious reader of grad student papers, a woman named Rhoda Coatson, who at that time I thought to be a lesbian and a non-believer. Now, everyone changes over time, so I'm not so sure she, in fact, has always been such, and she's still among us. At any rate, what I'm getting to, bit by bit, inch by inch, is the arguments that were engaged by my director and by the people on the committee and by people in the department. The arguments that were engaged about abortion were detailed, highly analytic, sustained, enough to easily generate 300 pages of grad school dissertation ease, a whole special language of its own. Now, over the last 50 years, I've noticed, especially in the, what could I call it, the middle brow to a little bit higher New York Times level of discussion, a terrible flattening of the arguments. All kinds of considerations that were once really attended to are simply ignored. It's now a matter of personal autonomy and nothing else. Personal autonomy. And the very idea that there are two persons, not just one person, is wholly ignored. Wholly ignored. So in 50 years, I've seen just a horrible flattening of the discussion, of the debates, nest of debates. And I can't help but think that a lot of that has to do with the pressure of the mass media. Just a whole lot of considerations are simply not admitted to the table. They're not admitted. They're not allowed. Now, that's a macro kind of observation. Micro kind of observation has to do with getting close to what's going on. And Peter, you I think, are somebody who is close to what's going on at the school board level. But there are different ways we can try to get close to what's going on. We just recently in California had a primary, and in that primary, our American Solidarity candidate, Mark Rouzan, did better than anyone in California has ever done. Now, not that any of us have ever done very well, but he did decidedly better than any of us have ever done before. Now, interesting thing. Why did we get as much traction as we did? Well, we all have anecdotal stories, but the statistician for the American Solidarity Party and a young woman, Katja Asensio, on our campaign team said, "What? We have a statistician?" Our statistician, Bryce Worgan, did an extraordinary analysis, zip code by zip code, right down the line of where we got votes and where we didn't get votes. And not only did he do that for this March primary, but he compared and contrasted, and teachers love comparing and contrasting, compared and contrasted his analysis of this latest effort with the last two efforts, actually the last three efforts. And it was a real eye-opener for me. I'm not a numbers person. I read accounts of numbers, but his getting down to what's going on at this level, that level, and the other level was really important for us. I'm sure it will be really important for you. And one of the amazing things that we found out, no one knew, we have the most traction not with rural Latinos. We have the most traction with urban Asians. I could not believe it. But there's no arguing with the numbers that Bryce had. So, point of sprawling observation, macro level, the debate has gotten worse and worse and worse in terms of its level of acuity. Micro level, there's all kinds of things that we could do that we haven't yet done and that you will be able to do. And that's a green shoot, I think.
Mm.
You know, Jim, I don't know how much sophistication to imagine my campaign has, but I'm intrigued by findings that you share from Bryce. I'm not surprised, but I'm pleased to learn of them. Here, toward the beginning of my comments, there is a number of people who I think would embrace our platform for the very reason that it is consistent.
Although we had thought about doing a daily show with you, Peter. We had thought about doing a daily show.
Sadly, I'm not at a place where I have access to Wi-Fi with my phone, so I apologize. I was trying to be as close to a window as I could be in an effort to have the best data access. But if I may continue, Jim, to your point, I think there is a consistency about the values and the principles that the American Solidarity Party promotes, and I think it has broad appeal. It doesn't surprise me that the demographic that you mentioned seem to have an attraction to it, and I'm pleased that Mark enjoyed that success. I don't know that my campaign is able to target demographics as tightly as I'd prefer because we aren't that sophisticated. But all that being said, I believe that we have the most potential this year, not only because of what we represent, but because what the other guys represent, what the Democrats and Republicans represent, what they're offering us is a repeat of 4 years ago. And there are many voters that are not only disenchanted, but dissatisfied and even disenfranchised as a result. So I'm hopeful that by virtue of the fact that people are disgusted with what they have offered to them from the main parties, that we will improve by default, if not because we have a very good alternative to those platforms.
Yes. Mario, you want to go ahead?
Well, I'm not sure that I want to go ahead. I want to go back.
You want to burrow in. You know,
Yeah.
some people avoid rabbit holes, but if we see a rabbit hole, down we go.
What the issue, I think, I may be wrong, but the issue seems to me is communication, message, language. People listen, but they are in a different world. Our worlds are, as McIntyre used to say, incommensurables. And so we speak a language which is very rich, and I share those views, but it seems that the public doesn't get it. And for instance, you use very properly the word public virtue, but not even my bishop talk about virtue. They talk about value, which I think has a tradition which is quite different. But again, if we are going to talk about virtue, that entails that we understand what a human person is, that the virtue is a habit, there are intellectual virtues, there are moral virtues, and so on. People are completely oblivious, ignorant, and not even getting close to that meaning. Virtue, then sometimes they identify as something sexual in nature. So we have a problem, I think, in the message. I'm not saying we should change our message. I'm not saying we should change this tradition. Rather, see how we can, I don't know, deal with that before, because the other side has everything in its favor, which is the big media, the big corporation. Everyone else is pushing a new language, and unfortunately I see that every day. And so that was my concern. I don't know if you have any um, feedback about that, any evaluation about that.
Well, my evaluation is that I agree with you. We stand on a principle of solidarity as well. And we've gone so far as to name our party, the American Solidarity Party. Our chief principle naturally is that human dignity that we've been discussing. But the solidarity, Mario, also is in its essence desiring the good of others. What we observe today in our culture is people desiring the good of themselves. It's not wrong to desire good for ourselves, but not exclusively. And that's the way we often look at things. We're willing to make the sacrifice of others' needs and their good for our own. And it's a classic example is the abortion issue that we've been discussing. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that in the workforce. For example, the state of California, Jim, just passed a law that raised the minimum wage for those that are working in the fast food industry to $20 an hour. And I know that there has been a great amount of pushback. But individuals who are employed in that trade, in that industry, desperately need $20 an hour, if not more, in order to bring home a living wage. Yes, it costs more perhaps for our Big Mac and fries as a result, but the reality is that is where we are as a society, and we cannot dismiss the good, the needs of others simply because it is an inconvenience or something undesirable to us. So Mario, I'm getting a little philosophical here, but my point simply is that we need to be able to adopt in our messaging that the common good should be our outlook. The common good will impact us favorably because it in fact impacts all of society favorably. We can't look in isolation at our own circumstances and dismiss the circumstances of others because they are not important to us. We need to realize that we are all wired for community. We are all communal creatures. We are mutually dependent on one another and need to be mutually supportive and respectful of one another. That's what we as a party stand for. It's an uphill task to portray that message to others, but that is the approach that we are undertaking. I realize the challenges that you outline. We don't have the resources behind us. We don't have the mass media. We don't have the wealthy donors that are assisting us to use contemporary methods of communication that could better share that message with others. But we have to live it and we have to portray it to the best of our ability. And trust that the methods that we use will have some appeal, and hopefully the integrity that they perceive in us in sharing that message will have an impact as well.
Amen to that. Valerie.
Yeah, I love your kind of emphasizing the importance of the relational, of the communal aspect. And we see, an American generally perfect willingness to sort of accept the virtue and the value of sacrifice in terms of personal goals, be it, sports achievements or financial achievements. I mean, great sacrifices will be made, even just like for kids being involved in club sports, or, just even to attend, a favorite team's, regular games. There's great sacrifices that are made, but somehow you're right, it doesn't extend very often on a communal level to this willingness to sacrifice. Women, you might say, have a charism of being particularly attentive to relationship and community. And there's this saying that behind every good man is an even better woman. I don't know if that's always true, but I'm going to combine the next two questions, since we have several that we want to cover still, and time is waning. But how has your wife made you a stronger man and a better candidate? And then, with regards to your campaign, how does your running mate, Lauren Onak, bring strength to your campaign?
Well, my wife is a very compassionate person. She's the mother of 9 children, and the relationship that she enjoys with each of our children is so special to me. Sometimes as a dad, as a father, the relationship is not as developed with each child as it is with a mom. There is something in nature that just makes it a more simple or less demanding nurture in a relationship. And I always admire that in my wife. And she's much, much better grounded than I am in those relationships. And so I enjoy observing them and learning from them, and hopefully taking lessons from them and improving them. My wife is exactly the opposite from me in terms of public ambitions, in running for office and trying to bring more holistic change. She's very centered on the needs that she has before her obligations in her employment, her obligation rearing her children, and trying to be an example for her children in their raising our grandchildren. Those are the most noble of traits, and I have the deepest respect for them. I wish that I could employ them as effectively as she does. I see those traits in Lauren Onak too. Lauren is a fantastic running mate, and it was a blessing for me to be able to prevail upon her to join my ticket. First of all, Lauren is younger than my 2 oldest children. So there is a bit of separation in age between the 2 of us. As a baby boomer, it didn't seem a natural fit at first to ask a millennial to be a part of a presidential ticket. But the more reflection I gave to it, the more I saw the value in it. She brings not only a woman's point of view, but she brings the point of view of a different generation, a generation that has much different experiences from my own. She brings a mother's perspective, and she also brings a perspective of a mother with a child of special needs. She has a keen experience that most do not have. So she has a real empathy that requires development, for example, on my part. These are tremendous advantages to me because just simple dialogue with my wife, with my children, with Lauren, helped me to gain a new perspective and a deeper appreciation for the needs we have as a society. I can rely on my own point of view, but I admit that it's often colored by my own experiences, my own upbringing, my own formation, and my own interests. Having the number of children that I do, having the people close to me that I have, and the ability to tap into their experiences, their interests, their hardships, really gives me an opportunity to better understand the needs that we have as a broader society.
We are in the tradition of Christian democracy. And over the past few years, we've had guests on the show that come from Europe who are in the tradition of Christian democracy. Sweden in particular. And I'm sure that would have surprised Jacques Maritain to find out that he had a Swedish following the year 2024. Is there something you could say about carving out space for the tradition of Christian democracy here in the United States? How we could come to a point where people would recognize that there is such a thing?
You know, we obviously have Judaism roots as a nation. So many of our laws, so many of our values, the things that have shaped our culture through the centuries, all have a foundation in those values, the Judeo-Christian values. But it seems we've come to a point in modern society where, at least in America, religious faith is almost viewed as antiquated and maybe even akin to superstition, akin to, something that has a basis in something other than logic. But as Christians, all four of us certainly have a respect for the relationship that faith and reason have with one another. And our faith as Christians is informed by reason. It's informed by intellect. The values that we portray as Christian Democrats in the American Solidarity Party really have their strongest basis in natural law. And we make argument to natural law through reason, through intellect. We can observe who we are as human beings. We can observe the world around us as the environment in which we live. We can observe relationships that we enjoy, and we can infer from that so much through natural law. And so the values that we have as Christian Democrats have that as their bedrock. It's unfortunate that they are most often looked at in a negative way because they're perceived to be the imposition of values that are from outside of our own particular sphere of influence. But I would offer that what we stand for in the respect for human dignity, in realizing that solidarity means a benefit to us as much as it means to others, is all based in our observation and our understanding of the natural law. I'm not sure that I've answered your question, but I hope that it gives you some perspective, at least, of where I'm coming from when I think of our own history as an American Solidarity Party and its relationship with Christian democracy.
Yes, it certainly does respond to my question. One central consideration here, and many people have noted it, is that at least since the 1800s in this country, there has been a privatization of religion, and it has to do with personal sentiment. And that's something that makes it difficult to get into the public sphere if you think of religion in those terms. I remember little things you remember. A relative of mine, well-meaning, sincere fellow, I don't think he's seen the inside of the church in decades, if ever. He said to me, "Well, how was the service today?"
Mm-hmm.
How was the service today? And I think the question was really meant to be, did you get your measure of uplift?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say, well, it's a service in one way, but it's a call to action in another way. And it's not just my emotional response to today's service. Oh, what a wonderful service, Pastor. But it's something that ranges right through the whole of God's creation. Mario, I think we have time for one last question.
Well,
And
then
I don't want any more of your cockeyed optimism either.
what is the do you have any polls in some state that indicate where the American Solidarity Party is at this point?
No, honestly, Mario, we don't have the resources to be doing polling like that. I can say that we have been successful in obtaining ballot access in some states, and we have people on the ground, volunteers that are working to secure ballot access in many more. I can tell you that every one of the 50 states has individuals who've committed themselves to our party and to its principles. But quite frankly, we don't have the resources that the major parties enjoy to be able to do that type of polling, as you've observed, and both Valerie and Jim have observed. We are not in the mainstream media on the nightly news. We see Biden there, we see Trump there, we even see Kennedy there more regularly than any other third-party candidate these days. But the American Solidarity Party is not on their radar. I know from occasions of visiting other states, in meeting with people, and with the responses I get through my social media outreach, that there is sentiment, there is belief in what we offer, there is a desire to embrace the platform and the policies of the American Solidarity Party because, as I shared before, there is a distinct complementarity about them. I don't say to somebody, well, let's protect the children in the classroom, but not protect the children in the womb. I see a lack of intellectual honesty in those positions. How can we say we need to restrict guns and we need to improve the mental health of society so that we don't have public mass shootings, but protecting children in utero is not important to us? I shared with you at the beginning that our platform is very holistic, very complementary, and complementarity about all of its principles. It begins with human life and human dignity. Everything that we pass in law has to do with some human need. Is it healthcare? Is it education? Is it the environment? Is it commerce? Is it defense? It's all really boiling down to providing for a need of human beings. If we respect human beings as individuals and want to protect them and provide for them, we have to do so at all levels, at all ages, at all stages. So I'm going afield of your question about polls, and I apologize for that. But the point that I'd like to make as we draw to a close is that there's much to be appreciated and embraced about not just who we are, but what we stand for, and the relationship that all of these policies and positions have with one another. And I hope that as more people become familiar with them, that we will have an increase in popularity, increase in numbers, and increase in support.
Thank you. We end, as always, with the gospel for the day. And I think we could call this a gospel of getting it, of understanding what's actually happening, and at the deepest level. This is from Luke. That very day, the first day of the week, 2 of Jesus' disciples were going to a village 7 miles from Jerusalem called Emmaus. And they were conversing about all the things that had occurred. And it happened that while they were conversing and debating, Jesus himself drew near and walked with them, but their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing as you walk along?" They stopped, looking downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, said to him in reply, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know of the things that have taken place in these days?" And he replied to them, What sort of things? And they said to him, "The things that happened to Jesus the Nazarene, who was a prophet, mighty indeed, and word before God and all the people, how our chief priests and rulers both handed him over to a sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping that he would be the one to redeem Israel. And besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since this took place. Some women from our group, however, have astounded us. They were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find his body. They came back and reported that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who announced that he was alive. Then some of those with us went to the tomb and found things just as the women had described, but him they did not see. And he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets spoke. Was it not necessary that Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them what referred to him in all the scriptures. As they approached the village to which they were going, he gave the impression that he was going on farther. But they urged him, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening and the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. And it happened that while he was with them at table, he took bread, said the blessing, broke it, and gave it to them. With that, their eyes were opened and they recognized him, but he vanished from their sight. Then they said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he spoke to us on the way and opened the scriptures to us?" So they set out at once and returned to Jerusalem, where they found gathered together the 11 and those with them who were saying, "The Lord has truly been raised and has appeared to Simon." Then the two recounted what had taken place on the way and how he was made known to them in the breaking of the bread. Come, Lord Jesus, come.
If I may quickly, Peter, I do want to give you an opportunity. If folks listening feel that they want to support your campaign, if they feel that you're bringing some light into the darkness of the American political landscape right now, how can they support your campaign?
Thank you, Valerie. PeterSonski.com is my website. I have opportunity for people to volunteer if they can assist us on the ground. I have opportunity for people to make contributions, financial contributions to our campaign right there on that site. Those are the most important ways that you can show me support, and I appreciate it sincerely.
Thanks for your time, for coming back to chat with us.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you for the invitation. God bless you all.
you're most welcome. Godspeed to all.